But thank you for the invitation. It's an honor and pleasure to be here today to show some insights from the Food Shift 2030 project. Let me put it to full screen. Yeah, perfect. You should be able to see my presentation now. Yeah, as introduced, I would like to share the multi-actor framework for citizen engagement towards a food system transformation that we apply within the Food Shift 2030 project. Here's a short overview or agenda, what to expect, what I brought with me for you today, and what I would like to share, which is, for one, a project overview, just a short summary, then the understanding of the concept in terms of citizen and engagement and food citizens that we apply, some insights and examples from the project, and a conclusion by summarizing the food shift approach towards a food system transformation. Yeah, first, the project overview. What is Food Shift 2030? It is a European Horizon 2020 project that started in January 2020 and will last till the end of next year. Food Shift 2030 is an innovation action project. So there are different EU projects, research projects on the one hand, but also innovation projects as a different type. And in this case, the focus is not so much on generating knowledge and applying or testing theories, but really on supporting the development of innovations together with practical, with stakeholders from practice, but also supported by academic knowledge or expertise knowledge to support them and accelerate their innovation. The slogan of Food Shift, or the bigger vision and goal, is the future of food that is low carbon, circular, and plant-based. This is a general orientation that we are trying to head towards. And the project is coordinated by the University in Copenhagen in Denmark. And if you're interested to find out more about the different labs or follow the project in the future, on the upper right corner, you can find some links and information to follow on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. But for now, I will give you some short orientation. So the overarching goal of the Food Shift 2030 project is to promote a food system transformation towards a low carbon, plant-based, and circular future, like I mentioned, by using and supporting the transformative power of citizens already involved in developing sustainable innovations of the food system in European city regions. So across Europe, they're already citizen engaged, but with the Food Shift 2030 project, we try to support them and scale up the innovations. How? This is a short summary of what I mentioned is, by using the supportive, transformative power of already active citizens. And although there are many cities already active, we selected 9 Food Shift so-called case study regions, which you can see here on the right side, which is Athens, Avignon, Barcelona, Bari, Berlin, Brasov, Copenhagen, Ostend, and Wrocław. And they all have different innovation foci. I won't go into the details now of the different focus. I have 3 examples with me later on, but you can also find more information on the website. Just to give you 2 examples, for instance, the city region of Athens focuses on an open school lab that focuses on education of school children, but also teachers and parents on food behavior, consumption habits to make informed decisions. Or on the other hand, we have Ostend in Belgium that focuses on the development of a city agro-park that is an agriculture park. It's a public space in the city of Ostend where multiple uses are combined. So in the same park, you find spaces for leisure, for hanging out, but it's the site for community-supported agriculture. There's also an education site where kids or people in general can learn about different spices and herbs. So really using public space for multiple functions. And after the first 3 years of the project, each of these 9 case study regions found 3 or at least 3 partners, so-called fellow regions, where they share their knowledge with, where they grow together. So the transformation is spread out to more regions than the 9 case studies. And FoodShift promotes collaborations between local governments, NGOs, academia, and SMEs, because we think that the different stakeholders together can bring out a collective intelligence that just one actor alone could not achieve. And it's supporting an iterative innovation process by applying system thinking, design thinking, also experimenting, doing or learning by doing. Lots of these steps are involved. Also failures, they are unavoidable, but they're also part of the learning process. Yeah, here you have an overview of the different regions across Europe. The bigger kind of magenta red spots are the 9 innovation cases that we started with. And the smaller dots are the partner cities that learned now from the case study regions. And in some cases, like in Ostend in Belgium, you can see that the fellow regions are really, really close to the city. But that's not always the case. In other cases, for instance, Berlin, the partner cities are also spread out, for instance, in Zurich, Switzerland, but also across Germany, Lübeck, Bochum. So it's not always the same city. And across all the actions across Europe, although they have different innovation foci, we have 4 core themes that we try to address in all regions, which is, for one, citizen empowerment, to make informed decisions about their food consumption and influence the way their food is produced, distributed, and recycled. But we also focus on job creation by assisting the food sector startups, supporting business developments, and so on and so forth. We also try to ensure that both or all 3 parts, economic, environmental, and societal sustainability, is embedded when maturing or scaling up the innovations, and not just focus on economic factors, for instance. And we also try to achieve this food system transition by facilitating cooperations or collaborations between SMEs, NGOs, local governments, researchers, citizens, and so on. And this is what we refer to the multi-stakeholder arrangements or initiatives. They are really important part. They are loose and sometimes temporary partnerships, and they can be very different depending on who is involved, which partners, for what purpose. And within FoodShift, the purpose is mainly on societal and system transformations. And it seeks to find societal and system solutions for problems that occur across Europe, but also further. And I will go into detail in the examples of what kind of solutions are found in which problems we address. Before I go into the practical examples, let's set us a common frame of reference to have a common understanding. When I talk about citizen engagement and food citizens, what do I mean by that? Within FoodShift, we use the understanding of Adler and Gauguin, which understand civic engagement as the ways of which citizens participate in the life of a community in order to improve conditions for others or to help shape the community's future. And this is a very active understanding of citizens. There are different ways. For instance, you can understand citizens as a passive way, like as a member or a state of a city, a member of a state or a city, or there is also a more active understanding that we apply within FoodShift, which sees citizens as an active participant in political life. So it's not just a passive consumer of policies or products, but someone that engages also in developing it. What does it mean in more detail? So food citizens has already been defined. It's a concept that's not new, and it's not developed by FoodShift, but we apply and support the concept. Wilkins, for instance, defines the term as the practice of engaging in food-related behaviors that support rather than threaten the development of democratic, socially and economically just and environmentally sustainable food systems. And when thinking of this definition in practice, what does it mean? There's a great website called foodcitizenship.info. They have more examples on it, but they think about it as the idea or supported that people are not just simply consumers at the end of a food chain that is being challenged. And they rephrase it. So our identity, our role in the food and farming sector, our relationship with our food and with nature are all being reassessed. And by shifting the way we think of ourselves towards a citizen mindset, we are active participants in the society. We unlock our ability to influence and steer the food system towards one that is fair and resilient for all, be it for people, animals, or the planet. And this is the kind of thinking that drives the FoodShift project. We also question the relationship with nature, we reassess it, and we try to build new linkages and connections. And citizen engagement can take different forms. We often distinguish between informing, consulting, involving, collaborating, or empowering. But we do not necessarily see one type better than the other. So the empowering is not necessarily per se always better than informing. It depends on the process itself. If you're at the beginning of a project, so in FoodShift, when it started in 2020, we focused more on informing and consulting, getting feedback, and so on. And as we moved on developing the information, we are now going more towards collaboration and empowerment. So it really depends on the process where you are. And across our case studies, we found that citizen engagement can take manifold forms and has many values. It really depends on the context. Here I brought you an overview of what that can mean. So citizen engagement can mean a participant in political life. Some are supported by participating in demonstrations, doing lobbying work, talking to politicians, and so on. But it can also mean being a participant in public life, shaping the public space that is being used, but also, mainly it's like also being engaged in urban agriculture projects, kind of what we've seen in the lecture before this one. But it can also be a participant in building up food system innovations, maybe by joining a community-supported agriculture or building up other food supply chains, testing and seeing how it fits. So it can really be a participant of developing innovations. And different values that citizens bring is demanding a food system change and co-developing food strategies. We can see that and we promote that within FoodShift. It can mean that citizens share practice-based knowledge on food. And this is really a core part because we found, or we support the idea that the transformation is really dependent on combining diverse knowledge, means expert and theoretical knowledge, but also practice-based or tactical knowledge. And this combination is really important. But citizens also bring new value systems to the governance of food systems. For instance, the ethic of care, solidarity, collective responsibility, all of these values have an effect if you implement it into practice, how our food system is organized and how we produce and consume food. And of course, citizens setting up local food supply chains and co-producing landscapes. For instance, if you're a member in a CSA or in an agroforestry project, or you name it, you also have an effect in co-producing landscapes, of course. How the land is being used, and how the soil is preserved or regenerated, and so on and so forth. However, there are also barriers to citizen engagement. It's not always an easy, smooth process. For instance, we can see a lot that power imbalances hinders the interactions, for instance, between the state or the government and citizens. And then it hinders a mutual partnerships, it hinders trust. So the eye-to-eye levels collaborations are really important, but it's not always given. Also, institutional frameworks and treasures quite often we can see that they hinder a change. Institutional frameworks quite often protect the status quo, follow regulations, and so on and so forth. But for change, it's not always so open, and it needs to be readjusted. But also the cooptation of civic innovations. We can see that this is a barrier where, for instance, companies chip in as funders and then co-opt the innovation and maybe shift the idea away from the original goal, and then promoting the business as usual instead of actually contributing to change, for instance. So within FoodShift, we asked a key question: how to overcome barriers of multi-stakeholder initiatives and build enabling environments for civic engagement to shape city region food systems. And to address this question, we do not have an answer at the beginning, but we want to find common answers. And here I have 3 examples from Wrocław, Berlin, and Brașov, where these questions are being addressed and innovations or solutions being found. So on the one hand, excuse me for 1 second. On the one hand, I brought this example of a short distance bazaar in Wrocław. Here you can see a picture of it on the left side. And this is a grassroots initiative initiated together with local farmers and consumers in Wrocław in 2009. That found that the regular standard markets or supermarkets are not accessible by them, and they also don't provide the products they wanted to have. And the goal was to improve access to good quality and local food on a weekly basis. In this case, it's always on Saturdays. And since 2009, they successfully established and run now this market every Saturday. They're instantly growing. And it's not just a market, now it's also accompanied by events, raising awareness of food production, but also food traditions, how to preserve foods, for instance, how to cook it, and so on. And the next steps is finding a new location for the market, because it outgrew its old space, it needs more space. As well as to provide space for culture activities such as workshops, exhibitions, and meetings for exchange of energy and thoughts. And this type of innovation is mostly social but economic. Economic because of the market, but also social because it shares and co-generates knowledge. It reshapes the relation people have, for instance, producers and consumers, but also people have to nature, to the products. Here are some more pictures from the market. They have both, for instance, like high quality specialty products from the region, but they also have, they make soaps. In the bottom right corner, you see an elderly woman selling cakes, traditional cakes. It also responds to many generations, young and old, and it's, like I mentioned, a really popular initiative now since 2009, that they need a bigger space actually. Yeah, the second example I brought is from Berlin. It's the establishment of an agroecological food hub, Lebensmittelpunkt, as we call it, and it resonates a lot with the questions that we heard in the last lecture when asking how to apply agroecology in urban contexts. And this is one example how we try to achieve it. It's an agroecological grassroots initiative of an urban community and regional farmers. We have so far 10 different farmers from the regions that apply agroecological practices, and we also measured it with a ACT, also those 5 levels of agroecology. And those farmers deliver their food on a weekly basis to the food hub in Berlin. And the goal is also to improve the access to good quality and regional food, but also sharing knowledge and strengthen the sense of a community. So it is a multifunctional space from the beginning. And so far, what we achieved within the time of food shift is that the food hub was successfully established, and it grew from 1 initiative that we started in 2020 to 17 across the entire city. And it also received funding from the local government of about 500,000 euros. And a next application is actually being submitted by the end of the year to secure more funding. Yeah, like I mentioned, the next steps is now maturing and stabilizing the initiatives throughout the entire city of Berlin, to establish a core network and to really establish it as a new public and social infrastructure, and securing the funding until 2025. This is also, we consider it as a social and economic innovation, similar to the short distance bazaar, because it really seeks to re-establish and rethink the relationships we have with each other, the relationships we have to nature, the planet, but also to improve the economic viability of regional small-scale farmers. And here you can see some insights of the food hub in Berlin. On the top, you can see mainly the activities around the CSA. So the food hub is a place where the vegetables are stored on a weekly basis, but the CSA members are responsible for sorting the different shares that then the people pick up on a weekly basis. So it's as soon as the vegetables arrive in the food hub, it's all self-organized. The separating the vegetables, the distribution, that is no longer in the hands of the farmers, but there's also not a person hired for it that is paid for it. It's really self-organized by the citizens or the members. And at the bottom, those 3 pictures, you can see it goes in parallel to the sorting and distributing. There's also we call it a community networking dinner, where some of the CSA vegetables, but also donated food, rescued food, is being cooked together and afterwards eaten together at the big long table. And the participants, the amount of people that go there differentiate, especially during COVID, it was a lot less due to the space. It was usually 30 people, but we also had nights with about 100 people on a weekly basis. Yeah, and the third example I would like to share with you is from the Brasov region. It's the Carpathian Eco Center Association. And this is an educational initiative linking diverse stakeholders like schools, kindergarten, canteens, municipalities, and producers. And the goal is to educate young people but across like various topics like healthy diets, local food, but also climate impact of the food system. And the goal is to empower citizens of tomorrow to make healthy and informed choices. And the achievement so far that this initiative had, or this association, is that they developed didactic materials and really established good partnerships between schools and kindergartens, canteens, municipalities, and producers. And now with this cooperation, the next step is to develop more flexible frameworks for the inclusion of non-formal education at local schools. For instance, quite often it's like written materials, it's presentations, it's in books, but the field trips to be a real regular part of the school environment is not always the case. So the developing of more non-formal education materials really at the core center of the attention for the next steps. But it's also to increase the community and supporting agrobiodiversity in the region. That's a larger goal. And here we would say that the innovation is really focusing on a social and institutional level by again, reshaping our relationships we have, but also by influencing how we think about didactical materials. How do we want to transfer knowledge? How do we want to apply knowledge within the school system? Yeah, here you can just see some pictures of the city of Brasov are located near the Carpathian Mountains. And at the bottom left, right corner, you can see some outdoor cooking with material, also products, but also old school material that is traditional to the region. And this is, for instance, part of the educational program where students come and cook together outside in the nature and not in a school kitchen, for instance. So as a summary, the food shift approach, what I wanted to share with you today, and I hope you can take home, is the ideas that of a multi-actor approach. In the case of food shift, we bring together a consortium composed of local governments, SMEs, NGOs, university, research institutions, to address complex issues and develop fitting solutions. And we start by the power of citizens that we see as active participants in political and public life and bottom-up innovators. We acknowledge that they play a crucial role in transforming their food systems through the co-developing food strategies, bringing in new value systems, setting up, for some reason, sorry, I have the Zoom bar hiding the last words. I don't know how to get rid of it. My apologies, but I guess you can read it. And like I mentioned before, an important part of the approach is also the knowledge co-production and sharing. In this case, starting with the 9 case study regions that we then share with the fellow regions across Europe. But we also create material that is open access that you can also use, so you don't have to be part of Food Shift to have access to the knowledge that we generate. And finally, the iterative innovation process is a core part. That means Food Shift focus on maturing, combining, and scaling up citizen-led innovations in the local communities by using sustainable design, circular economy. And now the Zoom bar hides again the last words that I cannot read out loud, but I hope you can read it. The translator can also convert it. My apologies for that. Yeah, that was the last slide. Thank you for your attention. Again, I've summarized some informative links for you in case you would like to learn more about the Food Shift project. If you want to access the open knowledge resources we have, or if you want to contact me for further questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Beatrice. We have one question for you so far. Are you aware, do you know any examples where refugees have been integrated into the urban farming or food system projects? Mm-hmm. And if so, which do you find interesting, successful case to show?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I can actually bring two concrete examples that I know a little bit better. One is the case of Berlin that works with refugees before even Food Shift started, mainly from Syria, but also now Afghanistan. And it's a project that is called, if we translate it, is Coming All Together at One Table. And it is a weekly offer of a lunch for people in a neighborhood, in a Berlin inner city neighborhood, where refugees, but also people that work at the offices nearby, any walks of life, can come together and cook together. But where the focus is that the refugees bring their food culture and cook dishes that's common. For instance, ingredients like tomatoes, you can find them in many, many places, but how the tomatoes are processed and integrated in dishes is very different. So it is a way of bringing together different knowledges to give them a core, an active role, not as receivers of a service and support in a foreign country, but actually being the ones that share their culture, that can live their culture in a different place. But throughout the refugee crisis, on the ongoing Russian attack on Ukraine, we also saw an increase of Ukrainian refugees across all countries within FoodShift. And one example is, for instance, in the Wrocław case in Poland, there is a social restaurant that is based on the idea of using common resources. So all the food they use in that restaurants is donated or saved from food banks. Hardly anything is bought. All the furniture in that restaurants is either found on the street or also donated or built together with the community, also not bought. And all the people that are employees in that restaurant is any people with disabilities that need more social integration, but also refugees. So they have an easy way of finding a new job in a new city without having a big education or like formal institutional hurdles. So it was really easy to integrate them. Either they support by building the furniture, or they support the restaurant by collecting the saved food, or if you have interest and skills in cooking, you can work in the kitchen as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Maybe somebody wants to ask something directly over Zoom.
Oh, okay, maybe I can briefly ask. I just think that if we have a possibility, we might finish this session also earlier, because the next session will include 3 short presentations, and it's better to give them a little bit more time. So my question is that the situation that we encountered in Ukraine with our Green Road network is that these eco-villages and permaculture centers who hosted Ukrainian refugees, so now they appeared in a situation that they need to communicate with primarily with municipalities in terms of resource distribution. And the notion of these people when they established this eco-village was kind of established like this community where they live together and like more or less separated from the outside. And now they are like at least some of them are really struggling. Could you, from experience of the FoodShift project, suggest any I don't know, exercises or approaches that they could possibly use?
Can you maybe specify a little bit more? They're struggling with what, like interacting with a municipality to ask for support, or struggling with being a community?
No, I mean that, for example, they need to communicate with the municipality in terms of providing some resources for these refugees, because as like isolated communities, so they just used to live on their own. Maybe sometimes they apply for some small grants, and of course you understand that municipalities, they have much higher resources. So now they need to interact.
Okay, so how, also strategies or tips how to interact with the municipalities? Yeah, that's a very, very good question, and also at the core of FoodShift. Of course, there's not just one answer, there are multiple answers, maybe some general things to consider. It really is context dependent. For instance, how much power the municipality has, how big are the assets. For instance, in centralized countries like in France, there's much more power on the national level, and the local or regional levels are more for implementing policies. So for applying for funding or resources, it's better to go to a higher level. But in the case of Berlin, the interactions is really with a local municipality mainly and asking there for money. Then in the interactions, it's quite useful to have we call it sometimes a broker, knowledge broker, that not all people go maybe, but that you select one person that is also familiar maybe with one from the municipalities, or can think more in terms of the municipality and doesn't make demands. You need to do this, but kind of offer the municipality an opportunity of supporting the people, of working together, and really work as a broker between them, and also have a common narrative or storyline. And also what might be helpful is to look at the types of resources, and that they're probably different material resources or money, or sometimes it's also support services, just providing electricity or buildings, something like that. That you try to look who is responsible for it. There are different departments. For instance, if I want to apply for a free room, it would be a different contact person than if I apply for funding. And then within this department, find a person that might be interested in a topic of, also in Food Shift, it's always the topic of food, that then link it to the question of a room, or somehow, make it interesting for the municipality. And then again, change the question of not what can the city do for the people, but change the story into what can the city do, what can the people do for the city. So if the city provides support for the eco-villages, what benefit does the city have? It could be helping to self-organize community, that the city doesn't have to do it, but they take up some services, education, inclusion, and so on. But also taking care of the environment, you name it. It really depends on the person who is open for it. Sometimes we also have people in the municipality that work more in the economic department, and then we argue from an economic perspective why it makes sense to support them. If we have people in the educational department, then we argue from the point of knowledge co-production, why it makes sense to support them. So it really kind of have a flexible approach and try to speak or put yourself in the shoes of the municipality and speak from that perspective.